Okay, hello everyone. My name is Joseph Cease, and this is our sixth podcast for Texas Blockchain. It's my pleasure to introduce to you all Josh Heller. Josh Heller is.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Is it okay if I call you Josh?
Yeah, Josh is great.
Awesome. Okay. So Josh is the CEO and co-founder of a crypto technology called LongFi. It's a Web3 application, which we'll get more into it. Fun fact about Josh, he came here for school. He went to UT Austin from 2005 to 2009 for chemical engineering. He's worked at ExxonMobil for over 1 decade, holding positions as like lead engineer up to supervisor. That's right.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Yeah. And so, Josh, we'll kind of keep this brief around 15 to 20 minutes. I just want to ask some questions about your company and just about how it can be integrated for our platforms as well. If you want to start off with a brief introduction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I really appreciate you guys hosting me.
Yeah,
Excited to be back on campus.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, like Joseph said, Josh Heller, CEO of LongFi Solutions. So we're a little bit unique in that in the DPEN or DY kind of sector, we're on the deployment side of it in terms of actually deploying the physical devices or infrastructure that the projects are kind of incentivizing the deployment of. So I know our focus mostly has been around decentralized wireless, but that's now brought into decentralized physical infrastructure. But yeah, I guess the quick part of it is that we typically work with real estate folks to kind of see how we can get the most out of their properties in terms of deploying different types of infrastructure. So it's almost like trying to turn real estate into mini cell towers, mini power plants, mini data centers, just trying to kind of take advantage of all the maybe unused infrastructure.
Awesome. And just to clarify, when you say these decentralized internet or these decentralized right,
decentralized wireless,
DY, that just means how would you define that?
Yeah, so decentralized wireless kind of became somewhat of a thing back in 2019 when the Helium network launched.
Gotcha.
And they started to incentivize the growth of wireless projects that provide wireless connectivity. Helium's evolved, and that could be a whole podcast on its own in terms of what Helium started and what Helium's doing now.
Right.
But they were kind of the grandfather of decentralized wireless, and so there have been many other projects that have come to attack that same problem of kind of connecting the unconnected and providing connectivity in different places, and then even more so now that it's the more broader term is decentralized physical infrastructure, which kind of includes a lot of different verticals beyond wireless in which hopefully later today we'll have a panel with some folks that are on more of the compute cloud side of things as well. So yeah.
Right. So if you could do me a favor and take me back to when it first started, the company, because it was founded in 2020, right? So it's still a recent company. So if you could take me back as to the origins of the right, the origins, and because I kind of just want to see I want to see what the problems were that the company saw in traditional forms of the internet and what they sought to improve.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So I'll even go back a little bit further in terms of my own personal journey in this space. When I was working at ExxonMobil, working on a lot of large oil and gas infrastructure projects, I saw an issue of infrastructure is very difficult, it's very capital intensive, and it's very slow to build infrastructure. So whether it's the oil industry or telecommunications industry, those things just move really slow. I was always interested in how maybe blockchain could help solve some of those problems of building infrastructure faster and maybe in places where it's more challenged. And so when Helium launched in 2019, I kind of picked it up as a hobby. And anybody could kind of pick up a little hotspot, you could deploy it, and at the time they were trying to build this contiguous global network that could be used for what they call Internet of Things devices, so sensors and tiny little devices that can. I almost think of the origins of it was long range Bluetooth almost. So it's very low data rates, but for sensors, you could put fire sensors in the forest and things like that. Helium has since evolved also into working on cellular mobile networks as well, but that's separate. But I guess bringing back to your original question on why what we saw why we want to do it as a company is we actually kind of looked to the proof of work networks like Bitcoin. And initially anybody could mine Bitcoin on their laptop, right? And then over time it became more sophisticated, and eventually anybody can participate in validating and kind of helping build and maintain the network. But eventually we felt you would need enterprise level deployers or infrastructure builders to kind of provide the foundation to the projects. And so we said, hey, today I'm just a hobbyist who's just deploying a little hotspot at my house,
Right.
but like some part of the networks are going to need enterprise level people, and that's what we hope. That's what we wanted to be. It was like we want to be one of the enterprise level infrastructure builders within one of these DY or DPIN networks.
Awesome. And so just to confirm, like the protocol you guys run on is called the low power wide area. I have it written down right there, right? It stands for LO.
Yeah, LoRaWAN or LoRaWAN. Yeah, that was.
It's
It's kind of like, think of it as like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. It's just another type of like wireless connectivity project. That's kind of how we got our origins. But the space has evolved where like other projects realized that they could apply the same sort of like tokenomic model or use some of the cryptographic features that blockchain kind of unlocks to incentivize different types of networks. So yeah, that was kind of the original. But now there's a lot. Sort of on the cellular mobile side, trying to either provide internet or better connectivity people don't have it, or maybe even in urban environments like here in Austin where there's maybe dead spots or things like that, helping kind of close those gaps.
Right. Well, Josh, I kind of want to get into like more the specifics of like the hardware that's like comprised within your company. So right, I'm in the team. I'm here in blockchain. I'm a first year student. I'm in the DevOps team, so we work a lot with like the hardware.
Yeah.
So just like quick questions over like the generality of like your product. So like how would you say I guess good question is like to begin with would to be like if somebody wanted to mine on like the Helium network, what hardware specs would you like start recommending or like start looking into?
Yeah. So Helium specifically, there's really two types of hardware or protocols, like industry protocols that they're using. One is using a certain type of spectrum called CBRS, where you can deploy what they call small cell radios. So just think of like mini cell towers, and then also they're working on Wi-Fi. So you may notice that sometimes when you go into certain like stores or certain buildings, your phone's like on AT&T and Verizon, but you might all of a sudden kind of see like a little Wi-Fi signal that like you didn't log into it, right?
Right.
But a lot of the cell phone companies are also using Wi-Fi to supplement their cell towers, because sometimes like the cell tower doesn't reach well like into this room. So what one might do is like put a Wi-Fi unit in here, like that kind of connects back to their core or to their cloud, and you're still getting service. You don't log into it; it just all kind of happens in the background. It's called like roaming or offloading. This is really common at the airports and like convention centers. But in any case, with Helium or several of these DY projects, you can either deploy like the small cell radios, or you can do the Wi-Fi units. And there's pros and cons. Like the small cell radios are more complicated, they're bigger, they're more powerful, they travel further, but they're a lot more expensive and complicated. And then the Wi-Fi, it has like a much shorter range, but it's cheaper, it's simpler.
Right.
So there's kind of like depending on like where you're trying to improve your wireless connectivity, may drive different choices and technologies. Yeah.
Right. So if we're trying to mine on the Helium network, would you recommend like a device that's like more powerful or like more like a local device? Because I know it could be. I know like one of the great things about this technology is that you can use it across many different. It's compatible for a lot of different Internet of Things.
Yeah.
Like technology. So I was just curious, like is there like a specific like?
Yeah, I always recommend starting simpler and then getting more complicated. So rather than like getting this massive like small cell and trying to climb on top of a
That's
roof.
what I wanted to get.
Yeah. I think like I think Wi-Fi is easier. So I always feel Wi-Fi. Yeah, because it's plug and play. It's easier to set up. And it's also a lot less expensive. So it's it's right there to kind of like I think build up the learning curve rather than trying to jump into the deep end.
Of course. And so, are there any current like technologies that are not supported with this yet, or is it pretty much broad? Because you said like it was like sensors, different other things are supported, but are there any things that like are not yet, or are still in the works right now?
That's a good question. I mean, most modern cell phones are fairly compatible with either of these technologies, especially on the Wi-Fi side. CBRS on the more cellular side, that's newer, and so not all phones are compatible with that specific like frequency band, versus some of the legacy ones that are used on the cell towers. But I think most cell phones are compatible with on the wireless side.
That's perfect. Yeah, and so that kind of I'm going to ask a follow-up question on that. So one of the things, so how is your company going to guarantee people that their internet connections are going to be secure? Because I know security is a very big issue right now, like in like the Internet of Things, and as we continue to expand, like that's going to be another growing concern is how we're going to keep this infrastructure secured. So,
yeah, no, that's actually a really good question, and I think that's, in any of these ecosystems, it's really important to take a look at the hardware and the firmware that's being used, and making sure that like all the proper encryption and like safety features are being taken into account. A lot of times on the cellular side, the carriers they will also like have a kind of like a responsibility to protect the traffic that kind of comes through. So they're all, in some ways, there's a little bit inherently safety in that regard. But one thing that's always a good practice, if it's possible, is you can maybe set up like a VLAN on your network where like you can kind of firewall like some of the traffic and kind of keep it separate. So if you want, I think if you wanted to be like absolutely sure and safe rather than just kind of like plugging it straight in, maybe potentially kind of setting up some networking rules and some basic firewalls that kind of wall off your traffic from its traffic.
Okay, that kind of answered my question, because I was going to ask if there was like any firewalls, but you answered that perfectly. So I guess with that answer, which kinds of industries do you see this kind of technology really impacting the most? Because I know earlier you mentioned airports, or like airports are like big hubs. So like which industries would you say like that companies are trying to look at right now?
So where we're trying to focus are perhaps like typically like the biggest venues, like NFL stadiums and conference centers and like big hotels. Usually the carriers do work with big companies to make sure that those areas have good connectivity, because they're guaranteed a lot of people are going to come through, and they're willing to invest into the infrastructure to ensure a very good experience. But what happens a lot is like maybe you're in New York City and you're a busy bar, and you're in the basement. Like, it's just not economical for Verizon to kind of knock on your door and say, hey, can I put a little radio or a little Wi-Fi unit? And so it's like kind of like these little dead spots that start to pop up that are just not economical for the big players. And so these kinds of projects either offer opportunities for my company to potentially come and provide those services and things like that, or it's almost as easy as like if you're the bar owner, you could buy your own little helium Wi-Fi unit and set it up yourself, and then boom, like you have like better coverage, inside your bar under the in the basement.
Right. And so is it that kind of technology that would you say is going to create is going to make it faster than its competitors? Like like Verizon, AT&T, like that kind of like plug and play almost. Like is that kind of like I'm just trying to understand how it's going to be like faster or more efficient for someone to use that or not use like AT&T or Spectrum or like
well the cool thing is that AT&T, Spectrum, or like Verizon could choose to say use that infrastructure and then not only could the bar owner potentially get better coverage but they also, for other Verizon customers that come into the bar and their phones use it for offload, they could earn more revenue from that. So what's interesting is like not only could you potentially improve the coverage, but this is predicated on like Verizon or some of these carriers making commercial deals with Helium or other DY companies, and that's what a lot of them are working on. There was an announcement a couple weeks ago where Helium Mobile is partnering with Telefonica, Movistar in Mexico, to try and help improve connectivity for their customers there. But that's kind of the interesting part, is like the bar owner can not only improve the coverage for themselves, but also could generate revenue by improving the coverage for customers potentially.
Yeah, of course. And so with that said, would you say that your company in like 10 years, like how is it geared to like, I guess, expand? Like, I guess, like what's the key for it to grow in the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Our hope is that this becomes kind of a paradigm shift in terms of there's just areas that kind of are going to kind of get left behind. And the way I think about it is like AT&T and Verizon, the big companies, kind of built the highways of connectivity, but there's always like little side streets kind of on the side that may not get the love or the connectivity that they deserve, and we kind of hope to be kind of like the sand that fills in the gaps, or maybe the side roads that are kind of like in that piece. And so our hope would be to be kind of improving connectivity on those side roads, across a big area. And a lot of this is kind of focused in the U.S. right now, but I think this model works even better, internationally, where it's a little bit more trickier to invest capital and do big infrastructure projects. And so I think there could be a whole global aspect to it as well.
And actually, I want to emphasize on that too, because when I was going through the company's site, it was like a map, and it showed the pit, right? Which I thought was really interesting, because I was like, wow, it's not just in America. You can see it in Europe and Africa and like China. Like, I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting, right? Like, it's the idea of like, right, like that kind of like international like connectivity. So with that said, I want to ask a question about like your company, like when it first started. Like, what were the initial challenges of like getting it up? Because it was started in 2020. So you and your co-founders, I'm sure, have had some problems and have some like, right? Like, so which problems would you say you guys have had, and how have you overcome?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think one of the things that a lot of potential entrepreneurs struggle with is that we had full-time jobs, and there's always like a push and pull, and like, does this have enough potential or enough traction to be willing to leave my kind of more secure full-time job and focusing on that? So that was almost like the first biggest challenge, is that every day I'm going home from work, and then I'm like, and it didn't really feel like work at first, because I was really passionate and really interested in it. But you're up late doing that, then you wake up early to go back to your regular job, and so balancing that, trying to like take on your lunch break, sneak in meetings, to kind of progress your side hustle or your side business. And so I think that was kind of the biggest challenge in the very beginning, was just like finding the balance. And then I guess eventually we got to the point where we kind of had to make a decision, and maybe we both kind of decided to take the leap and kind of go for it. But I think that's really, there's a lot of ways to kind of like, everybody's entrepreneurship journey is different, and there's no really right way to go about it. But it is kind of nice if you're able to sort of have it as a side hustle or a hobby first, versus being like, hey, I'm just gonna like quit my job and I'm just gonna like invent something or figure something out. It's kind of nice when it sort of just organically happens on the side, and then you have both going on at the same time, and you get to kind of a little bit decide when's the right time to like take the full lead.
Right. And so speaking of that, so when you worked at Exxon for over 10 years, but you didn't start this company until after you quit Exxon, if I'm not mistaken, or you still had a job when you?
It kind of overlapped for about a year and a half.
Okay. And so like, how did you make that transition from your full-time career into crypto technology, right? Because you were an engineer, and I'm just trying to understand, like, or like, I guess like more like advice for like other people trying to get into that kind of space. Like, how would you say you kind of picked up and you kind of integrated into that space?
Yeah, there's like, I don't know, there's no really way to like, I don't know if there's a right way to do it. It was kind of a weird feeling, I've been working at a more traditional job for 10 years, and then you put your 2 weeks notice in, everyone's surprised, and then the next week it's just like, you're on your own, and it's a really kind of like surreal, weird feeling. But a good thing at the time is that we were really busy, so it was just like naturally, now instead of having to like work all evening into midnight, you can actually focus and like kind of work on stuff as a normal all the time, like nonstop. And there's good things and bad things about that, because like in the startup world, everything starts to blend together. There are no more weekends or holidays. It's just 24/7, like all the time. But that's what makes it fun and challenging. And so I don't know that there was like an exact thing that made it happen. You just kind of adapt, and then I don't know, after a month, you almost forgot that you ever worked at Exxon for 10 years.
Yeah. So I kind of want to end off on like, so like for ours, right? You can see our hardware is currently being built right now, our different like built, right? So I was wondering if you could offer us any kind of like advice, or like any like for like at least on like the hardware side, if we're gonna try to get into like different like kinds of like
No, I actually know. I know exactly how you feel, because even before my business, we didn't talk about this in the beginning, but in like 2017, it was the first really big sort of like bull market when Ethereum and Bitcoin went up to quite a bit. I built my own Ethereum miner. I bought these like NVIDIA 1080s, probably.
Oh, not that thing. That's actually what we're too.
And I set up like a 10 card rig in my house in one of the rooms. And so it was like that. I mean, I think again, it kind of comes back to starting small, like. Don't try to build the biggest and baddest rig to start. I was like, I'm just gonna buy one card, and then I was like, I want to earn more, so I'm gonna buy 2 more cards. And I had a 3-card rig, and then it was like a 7-card rig,
Gotcha.
So I think just like trying to move quickly and kind of like increment as you go, I think makes a big difference. But it's a pretty wide open space now. It was a little bit more simpler in some ways back then, because it was like you basically mine Ethereum. That's kind of in that time frame or whatever. Now you guys probably have like a lot of options, and so maybe spreading your bets out a little bit, maybe trying different protocols, different projects might be a good idea. But just be careful because it becomes like it sucks you in.
And then you want to keep on doing it. You want to keep on adding more.
Exactly.
I know what that feeling is. But so how would you say you like? I guess the question is like, how did you optimize your like Ethereum miner? I know it's kind of a specific question, but I'm trying to get more ideas to how we can like adapt your like technologies and how your process.
I guess the equivalent today would be, a lot of these projects use Discord or some sort of like social Telegram, some kind of social media. Back then, they were just like I don't know, they were more like chat rooms, and they were there was like BitcoinTalk.org and like things like that.
Yeah.
But like kind of hanging out in those places because those were where you'd find people who would share best practices or like say, hey, I noticed like this protocol's earning more or things like that. So I don't know. I was just always looking for like the websites that kind of like updated and like and the challenge is like it's sifting through a lot of noise.
Right, because there's a lot of it. There's a lot of different there's a lot of different noise. But
so trying to find the people on these like social channels that actually are knowledgeable and helpful and kind of like following their leads, trying things out. And it's tough because you're kind of like digging through the dirt trying to find the alpha, on how to top. That's what it was like trying to like optimize my Ethereum rig to earn the most that I could.
Right, it was trying to sift through all the previous,
chat channels and threads and like
exactly. That's hard. So the last question I want to ask you, I want to end off by kind of making this like more like a broad question, but what advice would you give to our club and to like a different entrepreneurs who are in your position, who are in like college age or like who are trying to like break into this space? Like what advice would you give to us?
I guess it would probably be get involved in your organization because it sounds like you guys have a good support system and you have resources to at least like get some hardware. I mean, this whole thing, or my involvement kind of happened post-college, and so I was working and I had a little bit of extra money. I could go buy a video card, but if you had asked me to like go buy a $500 video card when I was in college, I guess that would be a pretty big lift, for me to go do that. But it sounds like you guys have a little bit of resources, so I think getting plugged in and getting your hands on stuff, like that was a thing for me. I think actually building it and seeing, like watching it, seeing what it does, and then trying to optimize it. And so if you guys have opportunities for people where they can kind of see it and touch it and work with it,
so actually understanding what's happened instead of just playing parts together, actually understanding why you're doing it. I would say is a good approach.
Yeah, exactly. Any way you can get hands-on experience.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, appreciate it very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Yep.